Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today on SportsNetworker.com. Today, I'm very honored and humbled to be joined by one of the greatest and most successful sports agents of all time, Mr. Leigh Steinberg, founder and CEO, Steinberg Sports and Entertainment. Leigh, how are you today?
Great, and glad to be on your show.
Great. Well, let's dive right in here and ask you the very first question we have for you today. There are many different agents today in the business of sports. How are you able to rise to the top as one of the most successful in the business?
I think it's key to have a philosophy in terms of how to approach athletes. My dad had two core values. One was to treasure relationships, especially family, and the other was to try to make an impact in the world and to help people who couldn't help themselves. So what's key is that we have a philosophy that athletes can serve as role models, and they can retrace their roots to the high school, collegiate, and professional community and set up programs that enhance the quality of life. If they start out with good fundamental values, a sense of self-respect, living in a family where people care for each other, and being part of a community where people nurture each other, those values will stand the test of time. So I look for athletes that are bright, that have a sense of how they can use sports as a springboard to second career. And really the product of our practice is athletes who are successful and what impact we can make together on the world. So we have 100 high school scholarship funds. At the collegiate level, players like Edger and James at the University of Miami, or Kerry Collins at Penn State, or Eric Karros and Troy Aikman at UCLA have all endowed full scholarships. And at the pro level, it can be programs like Homes for the Holidays, where Work Done gives down payments to single mothers, moves them into the first home they'll ever own, and then someone like Home Depot outfits it. So we ask athletes to put on a board the leading business people, political leadership, and community leadership, which is a resource for them. And while they're doing these programs, it's giving them a sense to escape from self-absorption and to see themselves as active citizens, and it lays the basis for second career. So I think it's having a philosophy and having the type of athlete who appreciates that and trying to stay true to that.
Piggybacking off of what you just said about being a role model, you yourself are a role model because you've taken up a very active role with the impact of concussions with the NFL. Now, you've been around the NFL for quite some time. My question for you is, how much do you think the league should be held accountable for the recent discussion about the impact of concussions in the NFL?
I think if you take the period prior to 2006, there was very little knowledge, awareness, certainly no warning to players. I became concerned back in the late 80s when I had clients like Troy Aikman and Steve Young who were suffering multiple concussions. When we would ask doctors what the long-term impact of these head injuries were, how many were too many, they didn't have answers. Now, one of the developments was that the brain was the last frontier of medical research, so we understand in the last 10 years more than probably in the whole 130,000-year history of the human race. But the second key is that we held concussion awareness conferences, 3 in Newport Beach in the 90s, and then again starting in 2006 with the leading neurologists and head injury specialists from around the league. And there were a series of neurologists from across the country who had state-of-the-art tests that finally had been done. And what they showed was that more or less 3 seemed to be the magic number. When a player suffers more, it occasions an exponentially higher rate of Alzheimer's, premature senility, Parkinson's, and greatly elevated rates of depression. So at that point, I called it a ticking time bomb and an undiagnosed health epidemic. And those results were taken to Roger Goodell. He instituted the first whistleblower edict where they asked players to report other players, and a physicians conference. And to their credit, they mandated baseline testing. That's a cognitive test given prior to play that then is compared when a head injury occurs to the initial results, and you can measure how much degradation of faculties there's been. And then make sure that the player's asymptomatic at rest, on an exercise cycle, at practice, before going back into a game. And that stops second concussion syndrome. The problem is athletic denial. These are people who have been taught from Pop Warner and Little League to ignore pain, to be stoic, to be part of the unit. And long-term health is an abstraction. I fear that because the athletes are bigger, stronger, and faster than ever before, that the simple physics of the hit has changed. And that if you just take the simple act of an offensive line and a defensive line hitting together, it produces a low-level concussive result. The problem with that is that a concussion is not being knocked out. That's one form, but it's a blow to the head or body that occasions a larger change in brain function. So if that's the key, think of an offensive and defensive lineman colliding together, 600 pounds of impact, and those hits accumulating over the course of 70 plays in a game, 20 games in a year, 10-year career. You could have someone with 10,000 hits. And this is a problem not just for the NFL. It's a problem that any parent needs to consider for the children who play any kind of collision sports. These hits occur in AYSO soccer. Heading the ball produces lower test results in kids. Field hockey, cycling, volleyball, baseball, basketball, football, and on and on. And at all levels, the adolescent brain takes 3 times longer to recover. So it's a special risk for adolescents.
Thank you for that very detailed answer. I hope that parents will pay closer attention both at the upper level and the younger level as they allow their kids to participate in contact sports. Another one of your endeavors that you're involved in is with the Sporting Green Alliance, which, for those who don't know, focuses on the sustainability and lowering emissions in arenas and stadiums. I'm hoping you can tell me more about how involved you are in that process and what you're hoping to accomplish in the near future.
I became concerned because it seemed to me that our species was in denial about the imminency of climate change. Oceans are rising, water's melting on peaks around the world, the water supply is threatened. When the oceans rise, it increases the heat in the environment, and it also changes the quality of life, and dramatic changes are happening. We need to move urgently, or we could be part of the first generation to hand our children a lower quality of life in American history. So I went out and talked to the leaders in the environmental field, Francis Beinecke from Natural Resource Defense Fund, and Matt Patterson from Mikhail Gorbachev's Global Green, and Debbie Levin of Environmental Media, and Lori David of the Million Man Virtual March on Washington, to try to get my arms around the issue. I ended up speaking at the UN Summit on Sports and the Environment in Lausanne, Switzerland, in about 5 years ago. And what I've done is to aggregate a series of sustainable technologies in wind, solar, recycling, resurfacing, and water to take to stadia, arena, and practice field at the high school, collegiate, and professional level. Now, if you add in golf courses, that's some serious real estate. And the key then is to incorporate those changes in the venue and the grid, and to try to turn them into energy providers selling energy back to the grid, and to drop carbon emissions and energy costs, and then to transform those venues into educational platforms. So the millions of fans that come can see a wireless urinal, they can see a solar panel for the first time and think about how to incorporate those changes into their own homes or businesses. So we put sports in the forefront, leading the way. I can envision Saturday morning cartoon shows with sports superheroes fighting for the environment. It's sports has such a transformative effect. Role modeling is so important that my dad had another saying, which is when you look for the they in life, you know, the they that's supposed to fix things, there is no they. The they is you, and the they is me.
Right. Leigh, the final question we have for you today is, what advice would you give to those aspiring sports business professionals trying to break into the industry today?
So let's suppose a student is still in school. I think the key is that they take as much business or practical courses as possible. Athletes don't necessarily want someone who can recite the 1942 World Series stats or from the Super Bowl in 1966. They want someone with a skill set that will help them and enhance them. So as much business as someone can take, and then go to law school or business school, or even better, a joint degree to pick up more skills. Now, it's not that there's a huge amount of law in sports law. The reason that I taught it last year for the first time was there's about a thimbleful of law to it. The point is that those will at least give people the sense that there's value added. Now, my second piece of advice is to think of sports expansively. Instead of just thinking of sports agency, remember that people need help at the league level, at the team level, at the university level, at the conference level, college ADs. There's a whole field of memorabilia and merchandising that's broken open. Sports television is another massive enterprise. And sports marketing. So the point is, think of all of those. And then there is the ability to intern at certain places and pick up some practical experience, so that I would do whatever I could to become an intern. If you're trying to change careers, I would not quit your day job because the economics of sports are like a pyramid. It's very difficult to break in, but there are people who hire, and then if someone's going to set up their own shop, they need a model, and to be aware that the different sports are different. The other thing I tell you is what's really needed is a commitment to look at an athlete holistically, the willingness to really care for the athlete, and an understanding that the role of an agent also involves being a steward of the sport. The real battle in football is not labor versus management. It's the battle that the NFL has with the NBA, Major League Baseball, the NHL, home box office, Walt Disney World, and every other form of discretionary entertainment spending. So if that's true, the key is to not have the agent's role, either in individual or collective negotiations, hurt the whole, push fans away. What we're looking to do is build the whole, build the pie, create ancillary revenue streams. So I think the right philosophy is also very helpful to get going. Again, there's no one formula. I got lucky. I had the first player in the first round of the NFL draft, my very first contract, the very first thing I did in law. That's just serendipitous. And then what's needed is a real passion, a belief in yourself and your ability to help athletes and to help the world. Because without that passion, it's so hyper-competitive that someone will not do the work necessary to break into the field.
Leigh, thank you very much for your time today. We greatly appreciate it. It'll be beneficial to everyone who watches this video. For SportsNetworker.com, I'm Lucas Biebelberg. Have a great day.